Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here again. And all of you guys for showing up. It's amazing. Happy Halloween. Merry Samhain for all old school pagans. Yes, I know. So if you can, I'm trying to get the clicker to work, but it won't. So, and this was the old sheet I was going to start with, but I actually made a fancier one. That one, yes, that's the fancy one. So, what are we going to talk about today? Hacking voting machines. So many of you, if you're from the Netherlands, have probably never even seen one. Well, you're going to see one in a bit, because we used to have them. So trustworthy elections. That's what we're going to start out with. I think if you're born and raised in Europe, or especially in the Netherlands, this is something you kind of take for granted, right? Of course you trust elections. But why do we? And why should you? Because what if you have an election and there's a lack of integrity or transparency of the voting process? What would happen, or what could happen? This actually does happen. What if certain people in your country do not have the right to vote? What would that do with the results of your elections? And what if there is a lack of freedom to choose who you want to vote for? So yeah, this is a very interesting one where someone wins the election with 99% of the vote. Interesting. And if you see why, then you can wonder, how trustworthy is this election process? Same goes for some other countries in the world. So if you're going to a polling station and someone snatches the ballot out of your hands to see what you voted for, how much freedom do you have to vote for the candidate of your choice? So trustworthy elections are something we kind of take for granted, but it's something that we should protect. Who's we? So I work for the Dutch Electoral Council. I'm very happy that Niels brought our best friend Count. Like, he blends right in, right? He does. So the Dutch Electoral Council, we are a government body in the Netherlands, and we are an advisory board as well as an authority when it comes to elections in our country. This is the council with the director on the left. And we've been doing this for over 100 years. It's quite an old government body. So I'm going to talk to you about voting machines today and why we no longer use them. But we actually do use software in the Dutch election process. And the new software that's being made currently, you can learn all about it if you go to the talk of my colleagues tomorrow at 2:45 right here. They'll tell you all about this software. But today it's about voting machines and the trustworthy election process. So how does that actually work? So we in the Netherlands, we have a couple of principles that we adhere to protect our election process. So first of all, there's voting secrecy on the left-hand corner over there. Do I have a laser? I have a laser. It's green. Oh my God. So, voting secrecy. This protects your freedom to vote for the candidate you want. Like when I mentioned that ballots can get snatched out of your hands when you're at the polling station, that should not happen. You should have the possibility to keep your vote secret. So this is a right. It is not a mandatory thing. So you can, if you want, tell everyone what you voted for. You have the right to do that. But you also have to have the possibility to tell no one if you don't want to. So next, there's accessibility. You want people to be able to cast their vote, as many as possible. You want to have integrity of your voting process. You want to make sure that it's correct, that whatever comes out of your voting process is the right outcome. You want people that have the right to vote to be able to vote. You want them to be able to verify that whatever they voted for is actually been counted, and whatever comes out of the voting process, the whole process they should be able to follow it. Everyone should only have one vote in our country, so that's the uniqueness part. So then the freedom of vote is very strongly connected to the voting secrecy principle. And transparency is very much connected to the ability to verify. And then finally, there's independence. And what we mean by that is that everyone in the voting process and the polling stations should be independent from the government, like the national government. That's what we mean by independence. But we did not make these up just waking up one day and went, what should these principles be? We researched and eventually came to them. And that story is the story I'm going to talk about today. Because if you are a little older, like me, you know this voting machine. And you might have even voted with it. It's called the NetApp, or NetApp. I don't even know how to pronounce it still. That's actually the name of the manufacturer. It's not actually the name of the machine. And we also had the SDU, which is awesome because it ran on Windows. So it's 100% cyber secure, as you probably know. Yes, that's sarcasm. So these are actually pictures I took myself, and I took them in our office because we have them to pet them every once in a while and think about them. So how did they work? Well, I'm just going to go and show you how the NetApp works because that was the most popular one and the most used. So at the top row, there's black buttons. You cannot actually press them. They are just the name of the party, political party. Then below, there's the white buttons. Those contain the names of the candidates. Those are in the Netherlands what you actually vote for. You don't vote for a party, you vote for a candidate. So you would press one of these white buttons, and then you would press the red button at the top. So what not everyone knows is that actually we do not vote with a pencil in the Netherlands. We usually do, but you don't have to. I voted with nail polish last time. All that matters is the color, and it has to be red. So if next time you're going to vote in the Netherlands, anything goes as long as it's red. You can do lipstick. Yes, that's awesome too. Just make sure it doesn't smudge, right? So these voting machines, we had them for quite a long time. We had them for like 10 years. But then one day, hackers happened. And they looked at the voting process and they went, this is off, right? They went and looked and also went and saw the American process and everything that went on there. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second. But they actually went and founded a foundation. Wij vertrouwen stemcomputers niet. We do not trust voting machines. Good name. And at the end of the day, they were called in Dutch it says the hacker as the guardian of democracy, right? This was in the newspaper. But actually, some journalists went along and told the story way better than I can. So here's a quick overview of what happened.
Vandaag blikken verslaggevers terug op hun meest opmerkelijke verhalen. Vandaag collega-verslaggever Ferry Stoop. Hij liet in 2006 samen met hacker en activist Rob Gongrijp zien dat de stemcomputer onveilig, onbetrouwbaar en makkelijk te kraken was. Alle stemcomputers belanden toen op de schroothoop. En sindsdien stemmen we weer met het rode potlood.
Frauderen met een stemcomputer is vreselijk makkelijk.
Stemcomputers, makkelijk, snel en volgens de Nederlandse overheid 100% betrouwbaar. Maar de stemcomputer is zo lek als een mandje. Dat toont Eén Vandaag in 2006 aan in een spraakmakende reportage.
Ik vind het heel ernstig dat ambtenaren op ministeries, ministers, iedereen die Kamerleden ook, die hebben ook zitten slapen. Ongelooflijk dat ze dit systeem zo lang hebben door laten gaan en niet hebben nagedacht en niet erin zijn gaan duiken van kan dit wel? Zo'n belangrijk systeem als de verkiezingen, waarom zullen we dat door een brakke computer laten doen?
Eén Vandaag bestaat 20 jaar. Verslaggevers kijken terug op een bijzonder onderwerp dat zij in het verleden hebben gemaakt. Vanavond Ferry Stoop. Hij maakte in oktober 2006 een even onthullende als verbijsterende reportage over de stemcomputer.
16-jarige jongens kunnen inbreken op dit soort computers.
Samen met de actiegroep Wij Vertrouwen Stemcomputers Niet doet Eén Vandaag vlak voor de gemeenteraadsverkiezingen van 2006 onderzoek naar de stemcomputer. Hij wordt volledig binnenstebuiten gekeerd. TNO uit Delft keurt de computer eerder goed. Maar dat blijkt een gigablunder. Want hij heeft geen serieuze beveiliging, zo blijkt. Hoe kan het dat de Nederlandse overheid de uitslag van de verkiezingen toevertrouwt aan zo'n matig apparaat?
Bijna niemand in de hele overheid wist hoe het hele proces in elkaar stak. Maar 4 mensen in de hele overheid wisten precies hoe dat hele proces, hoe die hele computer werkte. Voor de rest niemand anders. En er werd gezegd TNO testen, dus het zal wel goed zijn.
Dit is feitelijk gewoon een brakke oude huiscomputer.
Ik had het helemaal niet verwacht. Je zou toch zeggen, zo'n proces, dat zou wel helemaal dichtgetimmerd zijn. Daarvan zou iedereen wel weten dat dit werkt oké. Het was totaal tegenovergesteld. En het gaat eigenlijk niet alleen om het feit dat je erop kan inbreken. Het gaat ook om het feit dat wat gebeurt er met jouw stem als je op die knop drukt. Je drukt op een knop, wat gebeurt er dan vervolgens? Dat kan je niet zien. En de kieswet zegt, een kiezer moet kunnen zien wat er met zijn of haar stem gebeurt. En dat kan niet met zo'n computer helemaal niet, als er mee gefraudeerd is of gemanipuleerd.
Voor het onderzoek was natuurlijk wel een stemcomputer nodig. En hoe kom je daaraan? Nou, daar was een journalistiek handigheidje voor nodig.
Uiteindelijk hebben we een gemeente gevonden die zo dom was om ons dat ding mee te geven. Dus wij zijn naar die gemeente toegegaan, hebben gezegd, de verkiezingen komen eraan in 2006, de gemeenteraadsverkiezingen. Ze hebben onze computer meegegeven, omdat we hadden verteld, daar willen we mooie shots van maken. En toen hebben we hem meegenomen van die gemeente.
Maar het blijft niet bij mooie shots alleen. De computer wordt volledig gedemonteerd. Als gevolg van dit onderzoek wordt er tijdens de verkiezingen een maand later gewoon weer ouderwets met potlood gestemd. Veel veiliger.
Awesome, right? If you're ever scared that AI is going to take your job, just have a look at the subtitles. It's awesome, right? Those are AI. The leaky as a basket. Anyway. Yeah, but what did they actually do? So what they did was, first of all, they got inspired when the Bush versus Gore election controversy started. So there was a controversy there, and it was kind of, the thing was that they went back to the paper ballots and they could look at the little holes in there and they were trying to figure out what the voter was trying to vote for. And then they thought, well, what if this happened in our country? We wouldn't even be able to do that because we don't have any paper trail. We have like you saw in the video, it's like a receipt that says something that's printed on there, but there's no way to tell what the voter actually meant. And so in the Netherlands, we have what's called the WOP possibility. So it's the possibility to ask for documents to be made public, and that's what they started out with. But that turned out not to be enough. They tried to get media attention, but they couldn't. And so they decided to hack the shit out of it, basically, by making it into a chess computer. You could play chess on it when they were done with it. But then the manufacturer came into play and they said, well, you know, it's more secure now because we put a lock on it, as you can see. But yeah, so guess what? You could buy that lock online for about €1. And they actually did. So the hackers went and bought a whole bunch of these keys and they went to a press conference and they handed them out to the journalists. And they worked on every voting machine. But what does it mean? What have they turned out to be proving? So basically, of course, they proved it was hackable. You could hack it, you can make it say anything you want. They could hack it so that the first 100 votes, it would act normal, and then after 100, it would start sabotaging or mess with the machine. It turned out the storage wasn't very secure, because as you could see in the video, what they had to do to hack it was basically they changed the chip. That's all they did. So it's not that much, but you had to have physical access. There was no internet connection. However, when you look at how it was stored, which was very insecure, that was not very much of a challenge. And also, as they mentioned in the video, TNO, they tested the voting machines. However, what they tested for was not made public, and also the test reports were not public. Turned out, what they did test was if you put a snowy hat on the dash of the machine, would it still work? That's what they tested for. One of the things they tested for. They did not test any security type testing. But what ended up being the downfall of the voting machines was tempest radiation. So this is a little more technical, right? If you have a machine that, like this, it transmits tempest radiation, which means if you are within the vicinity of like a couple of feet, you could use a antenna to catch the radiation and find out what someone voted for if in the name of the party they voted for, there was a special character, like an ampersand or something like that. And that's something that messed with the freedom to vote and the voting secrecy. And that was a law. And that's when they decided in the government that we had to stop using them, as well as we had some problems with the certification process, because it turned out that what was certified was the machine itself, but they should have certified all the equipment around it as well, and they hadn't. And that's what turned out to be the end of the NADAP, actually. But also what they showed was it's impossible to do a recount. But then the manufacturer said, just press print again. However, that's similar to just having another look and say, yeah, it still says the same thing. It's not actually a recount. And the software was a black box. It was not open source. No one knew how it worked. And that made transparency and verifiability a problem. However, this did not go without protests. They got sued. There were many lawsuits back and forth. And as it turned out, it was not approved correctly, and it was taken out of use. However, to this very day, many municipalities still long for voting machines. So yeah, that's the thing. But how did we get to these principles I mentioned before? We actually had 2 commissions erected that did research, and one of them was the commission Korthals Altus. And they made this report, Voting with Confidence. And they came up with the principles of the trustworthy elections. And we, as the Dutch Electoral Council, added one more, which is independence, because they did not mention that one. If you look at voting machines and you look at the principles of trustworthy elections, there are problems. There are problems with voting secrecy, as I mentioned the Tempest radiation. There are problems with integrity. So it's very difficult to know whether the outcome of the election has been tampered with, because there is hardly a paper trail. It's hard to verify. We've had instances in the Netherlands with voting machines where someone cast multiple votes. This is the freedom of vote is very strongly connected to voting secrecy. There's issues with transparency. Like I said, it's a black box, the software. So yeah, that's problematic. But maybe you live somewhere else. Maybe you live in Belgium, or you've ever voted in Belgium, and you say, well, we have other voting machines. Yours are just crap. Maybe. However, the problems we have with voting machines, they are more fundamental than just the ones that we use in the Netherlands. Because there's voting machines that use QR or barcodes, and that's a transparency problem as well. So if you have a barcode, it's not human readable. And in many instances, you cannot, as a civilian, even scan them or make sense of them. And even though you can print in human readable letters the vote underneath, as many of you will probably understand, that's not proof at all. Because what is actually counted is the barcode or the QR code. And you can hack it in a way that it prints anything you want as letters, and then completely the opposite in the barcode. Recounting is still a problem. So in many countries that use voting printer systems like this, when they do a recount, they still scan the barcode. They still don't look at the human readable letters. They just rescan the receipt. Radiation is still the same problem with any type of voting system that uses voting machines. If it has a QR barcode, doesn't really matter. Radiation is still there. And even if you use a system where you cast the votes by hand, so you have a paper ballot, but you count it with a scanner, it introduces much of the same issues that we have with voting machines. Again, the transparency, the software that is used, and how do you as a voter determine that the scanner that's being used to count your vote was not manipulated, or the software in it was not manipulated. So even scanners are difficult in the election process. So there's actually someone who can tell this story way better than I can, but if you have the time and you find this interesting, please go to bol.com or anywhere. And you have to speak Dutch, unfortunately. There's no English version. But please buy this book. It's called Vertrouw ons nou maar. Just trust us. Because that's actually what we used to say as a Dutch Electoral Council to people that were a little skeptical of the voting process. But there are more problems with voting machines than the ones I just mentioned that were shown by the hackers. They're actually really expensive. They're way more expensive than paper. To explain to you, in the Netherlands, we have about 1 election per year. A voting machine will take you around 4, maybe 5 years, and then you'll have to completely replace it because it's just so out of date. So you will pay thousands of euros, because you need at least 2 for every polling station, for a machine that's only used maybe 4 times, and then it's thrown away. There's user interface issues. We've had countries that use voting machines where some candidate gets way many more votes than others while it's on a very random place on the list. Turns out his name was next to the vote button. And people mispressed, and so they voted for that candidate instead of whatever they wanted. Maintenance issues. At the end of the life cycle of the machine, if you want to replace hardware, sometimes this hardware is hard to get anywhere. Again, the secure storage, you have to store it in between voting or elections, and you have to make sure that no one can get to them. Again, the problem of what software is installed. How do you, as a voter, when you're standing next to the machine, can tell what kind of software is on there? You, as a voter, have to be able to see it. However, I'm shitting a lot on voting machines, but paper isn't everything either. So let me just mention some drawbacks there as well. So ballot stuffing is an issue you have with paper voting processes, where people put more ballots in the box than the one they just voted with, right? There's also things to counteract that, but this is a general problem with paper voting. Of course, there's human error. People are counting and counting. Sorry, Mr. Count. It's difficult, especially if you have very large numbers. There's a lot of issues with proxy voting. So if you can't personally get to the polling station on election day, you can ask someone else to cast your vote for you. However, sometimes people try and get others to give them their proxy vote for money, or so in the Netherlands we had someone who did that for mushrooms. Not the magic ones, just the ordinary ones, and it worked. That happened. And as one of the manufacturers mentioned of the voting machines, you can actually put a spy camera in a polling station, just because he was angry about the tempest radiation, obviously. So he said, you put a spy camera in there, you know what people vote for in the paper process as well. Well, he's not wrong. And here there's also a problem with security, transportation, and storage. It's not just a voting machine issue. You have to protect paper ballots too. However, you have to protect them for a much shorter amount of time. We in the Netherlands destroy them after 3 months. So paper elections actually have less serious drawbacks compared to voting machines. So I'm just going to go through this a little quick because I already mentioned this. So your voting secrecy and freedom are issues with voting machines in general. The transparency, the verifiability, these are all problematic for voting machines. And the unicity of the vote. So with paper, that's also a problem because like I mentioned, ballot stuffing. Sometimes one person can cast more than one vote. And accessibility in the Netherlands is still an issue with paper voting because they're so big, our ballots, you could sleep under them, right? You've actually tested that. So all this taken together, what does it mean? It means that we went from this back to this. Or in my case, nail polish or lipstick. What's my message to you guys today? Hackers made this happen. It was not us or any politician. It was hackers that went and asked themselves the question, can this be broken? And if so, how? And actually, I have the book, of course, that I mentioned to you earlier. And in my version, I had 2 people write a little bit in them. So in the red, in his election pencil, the author was kind enough to write it, to sign it for me. However, in the corner below, there's a special message from Rob Gongrijp, which is the one in the pictures. And his message is what I think is most important to you all today as well. And that is, do your best. It matters. So that's why we think in the Netherlands we have trustworthy elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I have this one for shits and giggles. So in English it says, it's impossible to hack the elections.
Okay, are there any questions? Nothing. There's
Everyone's
nothing.
asleep.
Oh, I see a question in the back. So now we have to... okay, this is improvising. Do we have a handheld microphone? That would be great. Look at me, running on heels. Ta-ta-ta. You can also speak in my microphone, but it looks a bit weird, I think. Okay. Thank you so much. Who had a question? I saw it here in the back. So, there you go.
So I'm curious about your opinions on Helios voting and the open source voting systems that are coming out of Voting Works in the United States.
So yeah, I was at DEF CON. I did a similar talk like this. I don't know the Helium machines very well, but I did have a few discussions with people from the US and their systems. And what appeared to me is they're making a lot of the same mistakes that we used to make. So they have the licensing, or like they make, how do you say that? They do audits. But what do they audit for? It's not public. I'm not talking about risk limiting audits. I'm talking about auditing the machines. So that transparency is still an issue, but I don't know the exact machine you're talking about. I know there's issues with the other voting machines. Help me out here. Do you know the Dominion? Thank you so much. Yes. So there's all kinds of issues in the US too. But I'm not an expert on that. I'm sorry.
Does it answer your question? Or?
Well, probably not. But
okay,
yeah.
Perfect. He will find you. Other
sure,
questions? Go ahead. It's all in the back. Here you go.
Thank you for your talk. I'm under the impression that the ways you can mess with the paper ballots are less prone to high numbers. Would I be correct in assuming that?
They're less prone to, excuse me, what?
To becoming high numbers of fraud.
Yes, it's hard to scale, right? So if you want to mess with paper ballots, there's thousands of polling stations, and then there's hundreds of, as we call them, GSP, so municipality polling stations. I don't know you call them that, right? So it's very much layered process, and there's many times there's checks and balances, and we go back to the paper ballots a lot. So the first count, or the counts that have been done, we check them multiple times within the process. Even us as the Electoral Council, we have a role in the election process. We are the final stop, and we actually announce the results of the elections when they are national. But yes, it doesn't scale very well, the way that we do elections in the Netherlands, and that's for good reason. If you want to mess with the election process now, it's very difficult to do it in a way that will move even one seat from one person to another.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll stick to paper.
Yes, please.
Anybody else? Oh, okay. I will first go to the lady. I'm sorry. Oh, this will be great. Can you give this microphone to the lady in the back with the stripes? Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, because we were talking about the actual moment of voting, but you can also heavily influence the outcome by taking the process before it. So with fake news, with those kind of things. And then we also talk about social media, et cetera, et cetera. Does the CISO also they work on that to safeguard the democratic process?
So that's actually a really good question. Yes and no. So we are partly responsible for the election process, but we share that responsibility with many other government bodies. So we try and at least battle disinformation when it comes to the process of elections. So we try and we have animation videos on YouTube where we explain how the election process works. We have videos that show how the software that's being used, because like I mentioned, we do use software in the election process, but it's for helping to tally votes. So how that software works, and we make an effort to make everything transparent. So we show the pen test reports we do before every election. We publish them on our website completely. So we also show the specific findings, not just like a mishmash of what they found, but the actual pen test report is on our website. And I think that if you want to spread this information about the election process, it's very difficult because everything is right in front of you. Every voter can check and have a look and see when votes are being tallied, when the whole process is very transparent. So that makes it very difficult to influence the outcome if you want to spread this information. However, if you want to spread this information to influence what candidate people vote for, that's a whole different story, but that's not something that is our responsibility. That's more with political parties and ministry and municipalities. But yeah, that is something that we should be looking out for.
Can I have one follow-up question?
Sure.
So you say you are sending a lot of information on the voting process.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also monitor what's being said on the other side, like the fake news, etc., on that process, like the digital footprint monitoring and stuff?
Yeah, so we do monitor a little bit, but we don't have like Cousteau or any of the big software. We don't have the people to do that, and we don't really find it necessary. So if something threatens to become really big, then we tend to take a look at it and determine, do we have to do something here? It's actually a funny story. So I think it was last year, one of the political parties tried to spread information. If it's disinformation or not, it's up to you. But they tried to spread information saying the election process should not be trusted. And I still, to this day, think it's hilarious. So what happened was their own like people that were voting for them were deciding not to vote at all because they said, well, you cannot trust this election process, so I'm not even going to cast my vote. Turned out that if that happened, obviously they wouldn't win the election. So they made a complete turnaround when they discovered that that was threatening to happen and went, no, we looked at it and you can trust the election process. It's very trustworthy. Please go and vote. So yeah, it's actually in their own disinterest to spread misinformation about trustworthy elections, because then their own people won't vote for them anymore.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions? You had a question, yeah. The microphone is coming.
Good morning, thank you for your talk.
You're welcome.
Knowing with what you already told us, will it ever be possible to use voting computers, or will we be stuck with paper until eternity?
Well, I'm sure someone has like a glass globe here, and we can look and stare into it and determine the future. I don't know. That's not a question I'll be able to answer if ever in the future of the universe we'll be able to use voting machines. However, it's not currently something that we think as a Dutch Electoral Council is feasible with the technology that we know currently. No amount of block AI is is currently at a level where that would be an option for us. And we do look at other countries and the voting systems that they use, and we go and visit and we talk to them about it. That's how I know a bit about the Belgium voting machines. But we have determined for us it's not good enough yet. But if it's ever going to happen, yeah, I don't know. Not in the near future, at least.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, will you be here for a couple of
Sure,
hours?
yeah, I'm going to be here all day and tomorrow. So if you have any further questions, feel free.
Okay, well, thank you for your talk. Let's give her a hand of applause. Yes.